Hey Pennsylvania, it's Wine O'Clock on Wine Time PA. Join Rob, Holly, and Steve as they explore their home state of Pennsylvania and all the wonderful wineries it has to offer. Each month, they take a journey tasting the wines of PA. If you're able, pour a glass of your favorite wine and join us now for Wine Time.
And welcome to Wine Time PA. I'm one of your hosts, Holly, and today I'm joined with my co-host, my husband, Steve.
Hello, everyone.
And our good friend, Rob.
Salancha.
To those of you new to our podcast, welcome. We are a wine-loving trio exploring their home state of Pennsylvania to taste test more than the 400 wineries it has to offer. In this podcast, we'll be discussing a particular winery, what our visit was to that winery, and some of our favorite wines that we tasted. And the winery we are featuring today is called the Winery at Wilcox. And this is located in the town of Wilcox. And if you're not familiar with the town, don't worry. It's a pretty small town. It's kind of in like the north central part of the state between the towns of Bradford and Johnsonburg, I think is an accurate description. And we're actually a little familiar with this winery. First, we're a little familiar with it because we've been to some wine shows where they have had wines that we've sampled. I actually stopped at this winery about a year or so ago. I was traveling home from a work trip in Buffalo and drove right by it and stopped in there and actually got to try some of their wines. But we also are a little familiar with them because they have a different location. And Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this winery actually has several different locations. They have their main winery in Wilcox, but they also have a location in the town of DuBois. Now, there's also two other wineries that they own, but they do have different names to them. The first one is the Winery at Versailles, which is in Versailles. I think that's how you pronounce it, Versailles.
Or maybe Versailles.
Versailles.
Depends how French they are.
Yeah.
Well, it is wine, so maybe it is Versailles.
Yeah, it could be, because I think in France it's Versailles, but yeah, either way.
So anyway, they have a second location, the Winery at Versailles in Versailles, Ohio. But the one we're a little bit more familiar with is the Winery at Hunters Valley, located approximately 30 miles north of Harrisburg in the town of Liverpool. Now, we mentioned that we've been to Hunters Valley many times on the numerous wine trails that we've been to, so we do have some familiarity with their wines. Mm-hmm. However, you will notice that their wines have some different labelings to it. For example, some of the wines from their Wilcox location will have names like Elk in them because they are from Elk County, whereas the wines at Hunters Valley will often use the term Susquehanna, as the winery does sit overlooking the Susquehanna River.
Yeah, and I can't even stress how beautiful that view is when you're drinking a glass of wine on a nice summer day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've only been there when we've done these wine trails, so we've been kind of only there for, half an hour to an hour at most.
Yeah, in the spring and the fall.
Usually in the not so nice weather, but I can imagine that would be a gorgeous place on a summer evening. Just sit outside their building that overlooks the Susquehanna River there. They have, I think, some cornhole play, or you can play some games out there, live music and things like that. So it's just a gorgeous setting and something that we should probably try to get down to one of those warmer days.
Yeah, and so it's just good to know that if you're, Wilcox is a little too far from you, but you're closer to the Harrisburg area, you can go to the winery Hunters Valley and try the same wines that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and they do have great views. They're up on top of the mountain. We've been there a bunch. We enjoy them. We chose Wilcox because they're a little closer to us, but we might not actually do an episode of Hunters Valley since it is the same vineyards, like the same wines. So it kind of, what we're saying today really does apply to both.
Correct.
Yep. But our focus today is on the main winery. So everything we're sharing today is in terms of the main winery.
Correct. And that main winery is located right on the Route 219. And they are open 7 days a week, and reservations are not required. So just pop in if you're in the area. Mm-hmm. The winery itself is run by a man named Jamie Williams, who is celebrating his 30th year in the business. Ooh. So, yeah, really congrats to that.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, the winery was started in a time when there were not 400 in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So for them to last this long and be successful actually does say a lot about their wines.
Mm-hmm.
They started out by making their wedding white wine, which I had to say slow because that's a little tricky to say fast. Yeah. And they still have that wine today, and it's pretty tasty.
Mm-hmm.
Their website also noted that in 2018, they were recognized as the largest wine producer in the entire state.
That's pretty amazing.
That's impressive.
And when considering they own a couple of wineries and a bunch of wine shops around. In fact, there used to be a wine shop right in our local mall. Unfortunately, our mall doesn't really exist anymore, so it's not there either. But so the other grapes do come from Pennsylvania, a lot from the South Central area. So when visiting the winery, the first thing you'll notice is there is a very big parking lot. Tons of people can come, and they have indoor and outdoor seating. Although this is not the time of the year because it is the middle of January for us, and I don't recommend sitting outside.
No.
But they do have a lovely big tent outside with some nice outdoor seating that I can imagine would be really nice spring through fall. Inside, it's a little smaller, but still very nice, very welcoming. It just has this like lovely barish kind of feel to it. There's wine along the walls for you to purchase and like knickknacks and other things available, kind of merchandise, and some nice wooden tables to sit at and enjoy your meal and your wine tasting. And the staff there is also incredibly warm and welcoming. Once they found we were doing a podcast, they gave us a few extra samples so that we could talk about them.
Yes, thank you for...
Yeah, and thanks to the staff. And I want to reiterate, this staff, I think there were a couple ladies there working that day, were really nice and awesome. So thank you again for the great, exceptional service. So let's talk a little bit about how the wines they have and how tastings work. So on their tasting sheet, there was roughly 36 wines when we visited, and they are broken down on the tasting sheet in these following categories. First, you have dry, which there were 6, semi-dry, there were 4, semi-sweet, 3, sweet, 3, fruit, 4, sparkling, 5, specialty, 6, after dinner and dessert, 5. And they also had a couple hard seltzers on the list that you could taste test. And the flights are done in either a 1 or 2 ounce pour, and you can pick any 5 off the list to try. And I want to note, and I think this had come up too, they had given us a few small taste tests of a couple things. So it sounds like that's something, even when I had visited with Stop There on the way home, if there's something you really want to try and just want a little sample, they're usually pretty generous about giving you one of those to taste test.
Wine is about sales.
Yes, and the staff, again, I'll reiterate, were very welcoming and kind to us, so thank you again for that. Now, if wine isn't your thing, they do have other options for you or your party, but their wines do start in a price range from $11 to $21. Most of those wines, though, were in the $15 range. But again, they offer other drinks. They mentioned, I think, Holly, you mentioned they had some hard seltzers there, and we were fortunate that they let us try their peach Moscato, I believe it was.
Oh, yeah, and that peach Moscato seltzer. I mean, we're not going to talk about rating the seltzers in this podcast because that's not what it'll help it. Yeah, try it when you're there. Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, if you like hard seltzers, especially fruity ones, I would definitely recommend trying it.
Yes, and that peach one was tasty. They also do offer some specialty mixed drinks with spirits, but all their mixed drinks do contain some of their wine with it. You can't just go there and get like a rum and coke, for example, but they do make things like a mixed drink with gin and pear, where they take the gin and they mix it with their pear mist wine, for example. So they do some neat little innovations there with mixed drinks. They also do some mocktails, which are nice for if you have some kids with you or people who just don't drink alcohol. They also offer beer, usually Pennsylvania beer. They had things like Straub and Yingling, for example.
In fact, I think they only sell Pennsylvania beer.
Yes, they only sell Pennsylvania beer, which is another shout out to our home state there. And what I kind of found really interesting, and maybe you guys won't, but, I asked for a glass of water, and they gave it to you in a little mason jar. I just love drinking out of mason jars. Yeah. So there's some of your other options for you if you don't want to drink wine.
Yeah, and they also have a lot of food available. It's kind of like a restaurant, but it's not a place you're going to go and get a T-bone steak. But they have a lot of interesting options. We had good pizza. We had a pizza there that day that was a Philly cheesesteak. And when Holly went on that previous trip, she came home with some leftovers of buffalo chicken, which was delicious.
It was a delicious pizza.
And I had the barbecue pulled pork sandwich that day there, and it was pretty tasty. And the barbecue sauce, they actually used one of their wines. I don't think it listed which one, but they made their barbecue sauce out of one of their wines.
I do remember reading that now.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, we also had some nachos, which were delicious. They were with a buffalo chicken dip. So that's why we didn't get the buffalo chicken pizza the second time. We went buffalo chicken a little different way.
Yeah. And they had like sandwiches and wraps and stuff too, I believe.
And also they have a brunch on Sunday mornings and sometimes do special event dinners, which is something, if they were a little closer to us, I think we'd probably hit up more often. But now that I think about that, maybe on the way home from visiting family up in Buffalo, we should make a plan to stop there.
Yeah. They definitely had some good food. And this is a place I would say, if you're hungry, come hungry. You know what I mean? They've got a nice selection enough that you will find something, I think, that will appease your appetite.
Exactly. Just if you do come for any of the specialty, food events, make a reservation for those. Yeah. Just not necessarily for the tastings.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Now let's move on to the fun part where we discuss the wines themselves. As usual, this is a part of the podcast where each of us have narrowed it down to our top 3 picks and recommendations. These recommendations are always our own personal tastes and preferences, and we are not being paid or endorsed by anybody to give you these recommendations. We actually always say when it comes to wine, drink what you love. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Just drink what you love. All right, let's start off. Steve, tell us what your number 3 pick was.
All right, I'm going to go with something a little sweet this time, and that is their Hunter Red. So this is their Concord, and I've said before, when somebody does a Concord really well, I love it. I love that grapey juice flavor. I mean, grape is such a great flavor on its own. Like, I don't care that it's sweet. It's just such a delicious wine. And this one's nice because it is sweet, of course, and it is in their sweet ones, and I don't know what the residual sugars are. But when I drank it, I didn't feel like it was like sugary or syrupy. It's a little less sweet than I normally expect a wine like that, which is nice. And it had just this little bit of tartness in it too that kind of helped balance out that sweetness. It's just a really lovely Concord. So I picked it for number 3.
Yeah, it was a good wine. You do like a good Concord.
I do.
All right, well, for my number 3 pick, I'm going to go for a shocker here. I'm going to pick a Merlot.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So for those of you who are new listening, I love Merlots. And like Steve with his Concords, when places make a good Concord or they make a good Merlot, I tend to really like them. And they had a really good Merlot. Nothing really, unusual about it. It's just a nice medium bodied with a medium amount of tannins. You had those classic notes of black cherry, maybe even some hints of blueberry in there too. So it had a little bit of that sweetness in there, which, you don't find often with Merlots, but I've been starting to see them a little bit here and there, just a little hint of sweetness in there. And this one had, maybe about a medium amount of oakiness. It wasn't overly oaked, but it wasn't lightly oaked. It was kind of a sweet spot there, and just a really great example of a Merlot.
Yeah, I don't like Merlots, generally speaking. This one, actually, I enjoyed. I mean, it's not going to make my top 3, sure, but this was all around just a really good Merlot. It was like everything was just blended really well into all the different flavors and aspects, and I did enjoy it.
Yeah, it was a nice Merlot. I'm not a big Merlot person either, but this was one I could drink a glass of if somebody put it in front of me. It's probably not one that I would personally go out and buy, but if you gave it to me, I wouldn't complain.
Yeah, great. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this Merlot.
I would drink it. So, all right. So my number 3, and I actually was torn between 3. It's kind of funny. Sometimes when we do these wineries, like 1 and 2 are obvious to me, and then like number 3, it could have been 3. So then I narrowed it down to 2 after I narrowed it down from 3. And then I was like, I couldn't really decide. So I'm like, I end up going with the bottle. We bought a bottle. Yeah, I end up going with one that we bought a bottle of. And that was the Elk County White. And this is a semi-dry white wine. I believe it's made from the Cayuga grape. And it smells like a Cayuga, which a Cayuga has a very distinctive smell to me of grapes on a vine. That's how I define Cayuga. It's similar to Niagara, and like it kind of smells like the grapes. So it's made from grapes. Shocker, I know. But this one was really crisp. It had some citrus notes. I think I even picked up some grapefruit on mine. And it even says in their tasting sheet, it complements many dishes. And I agree with that. I could actually see this being a crowd pleaser just because of the semi-dry nature, the fruitiness from the wine. I think a lot of people could enjoy this wine.
Yeah, obviously we bought a bottle, so I like this too. It was nice because Cayuga a lot of times is a sweeter wine, and this one was semi, which was nice. And it kind of had a feel for me where you got some of those nice, rich Cayuga flavors, but that grapefruit and some of the acidity in the back kind of actually reminded me of a Sauv Blanc a little bit. It was just I could see this going well with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, this almost made my list just for those reasons that grapefruit or citrusy notes in there. Just there was something about that was really tasty and a really great example of a great white wine.
Yeah, it really was. All right, so let's move on to number 2 picks, and I will go first this time. And the last round was, typical Steve and Rob picks for those of you who may be new. This round, my number 2 pick is a very typical Holly pick, and that is Pinot Grigio.
Yeah.
I like a really good Pinot Grigio. This one's listed as a semi-dry wine on their list. I know sometimes Pinot Grigios fall under the dry category. This one was a semi-dry. It had some really good floral notes in the smell that I also got in the taste. And there was actually a little bit of fruit in it too. Like I think it started kind of floral for me. I got some fruit in the middle and then I got a little fruit in the finish. I actually put in my notes, I got a little bit of a pear taste in the finish. I thought it was really crisp and it had a really nice acidity. So for me, that was just, things I like about a Pinot Grigio, they did. And that's why I made my number 2 pick.
I mean, maybe I'm warming up to acidity in white wines, but I found this Pinot Grigio one of the better ones in my liking. I usually don't like Pinot Grigios, but this was one like you with the Merlot. I could sit there and drink a glass of that.
Yeah, and I agree. This is not Pinot Grigio is not one that I tend to go either. I find there's too much acidity in most of them, and this one was just nice. The acidity balanced everything really well. I could drink this one all day long too. Yeah. It was a welcome from the typical Pinots. It just really well balanced.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think, listeners, we have a first here because as we move along in our picks here, as we get to our number 2 pick, Steve and I are picking the same pick for number 2.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy, too, because we don't always agree. We have very different taste palettes. But there is one thing that you and I both love, probably more than anything else, and that is a great red blend.
Correct. And so for our number 2 pick, it's the Elk Country Red, which is a blend of the Chancellor and the Chambourcin wine. I noted that it just had a wonderful aroma to it. It had a fruity taste when you start sipping it, maybe some hints of like raspberry, but then it just kind of dried out at the finish, which was really nice, and it was just really smooth. And I mean, yeah, I like red blends, and this was a good. Now, it only had 2 wines. Some blends that I like have 3 or 4 more, but this is a great example where maybe sometimes simplicity is better. Just have the Chancellor and the Chambourcin, blend them together, and it was a nice wine.
Yeah, and this is why you've got your vintners out there that really know what they're doing. You don't have to put a third wine in if you've already made something great. And yeah, I had a lot of the same notes as you. I had this beautiful fruity aroma. It almost made it feel like it was going to drink sweeter than it did, but it is a semi-dry.
It is a semi-dry.
So I had some of those nice fruits, nice red fruits to start. I specifically got some raspberry and currant. And that currant was nice because it added this bit of tartness that gave some nice fruit flavor, but also it wasn't sweet. And then, you're right. It finished just that bit dry. It wasn't overly dry, but the dryness was definitely there. And it kind of just blended so nicely from start to finish with all these beautiful flavors. I just, really enjoed it. Top notch.
Yeah, it was great.
It's like upside down Wednesday or something. Like, I think it's funny, listeners, if you listen sometimes, like there's areas when it comes to wine where we each have our own distinct things that we like, but there's areas where I overlap with Rob a lot, and there's areas where I overlap with Steve a lot. There's not a lot of areas where you two overlap. No. Like, honestly, like there's really not. I mean, there are areas, don't get me wrong, there are a few, but it's always cool to me when you guys find a wine that you both love so much that you want to talk about, because that doesn't happen too often between the two of you.
Yeah. We appreciate a lot of the things that each other's taste buds bring, but You're right. I love cranberry. Rob doesn't like cranberry, although Rob has found some good cranberries. And you've made me drink some good Merlots. So
right.
It works out. It's just about finding the things that you like.
Sure. Yep, it's all part of the wine experience. All right, so now we're going to move into what our number 1 picks are for this tasting. And, I just want to give a quick shout out. It was the top. They had some really great wines here. So for my number 1 pick, I went with the Gruner Veltliner. And I always say it a little wrong. Veltliner. Gruner Veltliner.
That's a hard word to say.
It is. And it's typically an Austria wine. I've mentioned it before. Gruner is one that I do like every so often we come across it. I'm probably one of the group, but it's a dry white. This one had some really nice fruit aromas in it that you did get in the taste. I mostly got notes of peach and pineapple, and I think a little bit of grapefruit in there. It was really refreshing with a nice acidity and a great finish. And I had in my notes that it went very well with the buffalo chicken dip. So, I mean, hey, if you're into food and wine pairing, I mean, buffalo chicken dip isn't exactly fancy, but it's tasty, and this wine went great with it.
No, and I remember you saying that too, because you're eating it, and then you take a sip, and you're like, oh, maybe I should have cleansed my palate. And you're like, nope, that went well together. And I remember trying it too. And
I did try it too. And
it did go surprisingly well together.
There's just something about, a crisp white wine with spicy foods that just really pair well together. And this Gruner was really nicely done and a good pick, Holly.
So for my number one, I'm going to pick a wine that I haven't picked yet, despite in our intro saying it's one of my favorites, and that's the Riesling.
Good choice.
Yeah, so I don't always pick Rieslings, and it's because Riesling is one of those wines where I can go anywhere and enjoy their Riesling. It's such a versatile wine, so I don't tend to pick them as my standout favorites unless there's something really special, and this one was just really special. It had that nice Riesling aroma, although the diesel-y, asphalty smell was very subtle. So it was nice because you knew it was a Riesling, but it wasn't, you didn't get that overwhelming bit that not everybody likes. It had all this beautiful fruit-forward flavors that just got followed by this nice, refreshing acidity that paired with the fruit well and just finished into nothing. And what I mean by that is think about eating cotton candy. It just dissolves away on your tongue and you're left with nothing after all that beautiful flavor. That's kind of what this was. It just blended away into nothing, and it just in such a pleasing way. I just really enjoyed this Riesling. And the one thing for those of you that like minerality in your Rieslings, this didn't really have a lot of that. So don't feel like you have to miss out on that, but it was a little different that way.
I think everybody's taste buds are a little different though, because I noted on mine, the Riesling was actually one of the ones I'd considered for my number 3. Like I said, there were 3, and this was one of them. To me, I got that petrol minerality, but I also got the fruit. And to me, a lot of times with a Riesling, it tends to lean one way or the other. Like one overpowers the other. Like the fruit overpowers the minerality, or the minerality overpowers fruit. To me, like I was getting 50-50. You know what I mean? Like I was picking up both, and maybe it was just my tongue that day. Maybe I have sinus issues, listener. Maybe the way my sinuses were going that day. But to me, I picked up both equally. That I actually appreciated that.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I definitely picked up a little bit of it, but not that usual amount. But maybe it was just the pairing of all that fruit and the acidity that just all of it just blended together so smooth and so well that I just didn't notice it as much. It didn't stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this Riesling too. I could have used maybe a little bit more of the minerality in there, but it was still a really good Riesling.
So Rob's on my side.
Maybe it was the buffalo chicken dip. I probably should have waited to have that after we had our wine, but I was hungry, so.
Yeah, but it was a good Riesling either way.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, it was a really nice balance.
Yeah, we
Riesling.
took a bottle of that home too.
Yeah.
All right, I guess I'm closing us out here with the last pick, and I'm going with maybe a little off the beaten path here with the Cabernet Franc Reserve. Now, this was one of the bonus samples that the staff was kind enough to give to us and try, and they do have a regular Cabernet Franc on their menu, and so we had both of them. The difference between the Cabernet Franc Reserve and their regular Cabernet Franc is that the Reserve was barrel aged for 15 months in American oak. And while I enjoyed the Cab Franc in general, I did think it had a little too much of that tobacco-y taste you tend to get with Cab Francs.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think oaking it for those 15 months, I think pulled out a lot of that tobacco taste, and it really just elevated this one high on my list over that Cab Franc and stuff. It still had, some nice smokiness in the middle there. The tannins and the dryness at the end was beautiful. And I think the Cab Franc Reserve was just a gorgeous example of what you can do with a Cab Franc.
Yeah, it was nice. I liked that as well. And I agree with you that the original Cab Franc had a little bit too much tobacco flavor for me, but the Reserve was definitely better than the Cab Franc. But they were both worth trying, I think, especially if you like those kind of wines.
Yeah, I enjoyed them both as well, but I like the Reserve better. I think it was that little bit of lack of tobacco flavor, but also as much as I don't really care for American oak aged wines a lot, especially of a, longer duration like this. Sure. Yeah, this was just it was just something special. I really liked it. I thought about putting this as my number 3, but the Concord won out.
Yeah, I was choosing between this and the Merlot, but so I went the Merlot with 3 just because I always pick Merlot.
You do pick Merlot, but this was a good one, so I get it.
Yeah, it was really hard to narrow the list down. So this gets into our honorable mentions. Rob, do you have any shout outs you'd like to give to some other wines?
So there must be something about this winery because, again, I'm pulling towards Steve's preferred wines for a shout out and going with what I bought a bottle of, which was the Moscato.
That was the big surprise. You bought a bottle of Moscato.
That was
Mostly because I wanted to diversify my wine collection at the moment. But this one was just nice. It had, those wonderful orange blossom aromas. Nice. It was a nice and fruity. It was listed as a semi-sweet, and just a really silky smooth one to drink. And I really enjoyed this Moscato.
Yeah, it was good. It was my third one. I said I had 3 picked for number 3. I had the one I picked, the Elk Country, the Riesling, and Moscato. Those were the 3 I was torn between when I was picking my number 3. But I now have my 5 set for when I go back to what my 5 favorites clearly are.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to the Clarion River Red Light. So talk about this one just a little bit. It's less sugar and less sweet, but it has a touch of artificial sweetener for a balance. And they have a regular Clarion River Red, and then they have the Clarion River Red Light. So there is a little bit of a difference, and I don't know what it is about that artificial sweetener, but I didn't mind it, but I really appreciated that it was more of a medium body, but a lot less sweet of a sweet wine, and just made it really enjoyable for me. Yeah. But I know not everybody's going to like that artificial sweetener, but I still think give it a shot. It was surprising to me.
Yeah.
We bought a bottle of that before too, actually.
Yeah. I think it has a few less calories too. So
I think it has a fair bit less calories, which my stomach appreciates.
Hey, if you're looking to try and lose a couple pounds.
So here's another one that I want to recommend, but I'm going to butcher this because this is an interesting word. It's the Schokoladen Kirschwein. I hope it wasn't.
Say that 3 times.
Yeah, no thanks. I barely said it once.
I think you did it pretty well. It's a very German sounding.
Yeah. So this is a dessert wine, and this is another one they gave us a little tasting of at the very end for dessert. And it was like basically drinking a cherry cordial. And for those of you not familiar with cherry cordial, it's those little chocolates that have the cherry on the inside that have a surrounding of some sort of like liquid sugar. And you see them a lot at Christmas. I swear, when I drank this, it was just like I was just eating one of those cherry cordials. And I adored that.
I thought it was like one of those Tootsie Pops. It was, like you're licking through to the Tootsie Pop because I got a distinct Tootsie Roll flavor in that chocolate.
Yeah,
interesting.
I can see both. I like them too. And honestly, I will be very honest. Usually if there's anything cherry in wine, especially certain berries, I love berries to eat them, but in wine, I tend to deter to them a lot because they bring back horrid memories of Robitussin. I think I've said that before. So I was a little apprehensive about trying this, but no, it was really good. It really did taste like eating a chocolate covered cherry. So I was really impressed with that because I was like, if you would have just closed your eyes and not known you weren't chewing something, you would have thought you were eating one of those. All right. So I'm going to round out the honorable mentions, and I'm going to actually go with a sweet wine, and it's called Cool as a Cucumber.
Glad you mentioned this one.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to talk about it, so I'm glad you
did. It's probably right under there, next under those tie for third, but it is a sweet white wine. And it's got lots of cucumber and hibiscus flavors. And I love hibiscus flavor. Like, I'm a kind of a fiend for hibiscus flavor.
Yeah, and it's not too much hibiscus, because too much can ruin something. Yeah. It's balanced just right.
Yeah, it's really refreshing. You get that cucumber hibiscus together. It actually has kind of like a watermelon taste to it, the way those blend together. There's some notes of watermelon. And to me, this is just the perfect drink if you're in the summer and you're just looking to sit by a pool or the beach and you want something kind of fruity and fun and refreshing. This is definitely the one to go for. All right. I think that rounds out our honorable mentions.
Yeah. So for their best-selling wine, it was the Clarion River Red. So even if you don't like artificial sweeteners, you can try the one without it. And apparently everybody likes it.
Yeah. She said it was the best-selling wine in the entire state at one point, or maybe still is. I don't know. That's what the woman told us that day. So that's impressive.
Yeah, some of these things that we've heard about them and that were in the past, like 2018 being the highest volume. I'd really like to see a breakdown of how that plays out today. But they're a pretty big winery when you think of the multiple locations. So none of that surprises me really. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great visit. right, so let's wrap up. The winery at Wilcox has a nice selection of wines and really something for any palate. They offer a nice variety of foods as well, set in a lovely atmosphere with a warm and welcoming staff. We recommend checking them out if you're in the Elk County area or heading to their sister location at the Winery at Hunters Valley. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll do that other location just to see if our taste buds are the same, Who knows? But for more information about them, you can find them on their social media or their website, winerywilcox.com. And Wilcox is spelled with one L, so Wilcox. Also, if you appreciate it, we would love it if you would help our podcast grow. Please subscribe to our podcast, follow us on social media, leave us a rating or review, and tell others about us. Anyway, tune in next month as we feature a new winery.
Thanks for listening to Wine Time PA with your host, Rob, Holly, and Steve. We hope you enjoyed our take on Pennsylvania wineries and all that they have to offer. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Also, be sure to follow them on social media for updates and news. Remember, when it comes to wine, drink what you love.